Hello, my name is Ron Bailey. I'm the Vice President of the Rocky Mountain Rail Society, and it's my privilege to introduce yet another chapter in the varied and checkered career of Locomotive 6060. 6060 was constructed by the Montreal Locomotive Works in 1944. She was the first of 19 such mountain-class locomotives to be provided with the balanced running board similar to that on this 5700. In addition, 6060 was provided with a conical type smoke box, and hence thereafter was known as Bullet-Nosed Betty. In 1961, dieselization was virtually complete on Canadian railways. The great steam locomotives were being cut up for scrap all across the country. Locomotive engineman Harry Home petitioned Canadian National to save one locomotive for static display in the station ground at Jasper. 6060 was placed on a pad west of the station in 1962, and there she remained for 10 years. In 1972, to fulfill a special excursion service in eastern Canada, pulled by an operating steam locomotive, 6060 was removed from the Jasper station ground and taken to Point St. Charles shop in Montreal, where she was completely refitted. After the limited excursion service was completed in eastern Canada, 6060 was stored away once again in Spadina Roundhouse in Toronto. In 1980, Alberta was celebrating its 75th anniversary of becoming a province. And once again, 6060 journeyed west to be presented to the government as a gift from CN in honor of the occasion. Mrs. Lougheed accepted the locomotive on behalf of the Alberta government. The government then built a shed at the Alberta Railway Museum in the Mayo, and 6060 was once again stored away. In 1986, Alberta was invited to provide an operating steam locomotive to the Steam Expo event at the World's Fair being held in Vancouver. 6060 was once again withdrawn from the shed at Namao, taken to Jasper, and there with volunteer labor led by Harry Home was restored to operating condition once again. Following her trip to Vancouver, 6060 saw limited service in Alberta until 1989, when she helped to inaugurate what has now evolved into the Alberta Prairie Steam Tours out of Stettler. But when Alberta Prairie obtained their own little locomotive, number 41, from Huntsville, Alabama, 6060 was once again relegated to storage in the Cominco Chemical and Fertilizer Plant at Calgary. She has remained there for 3 years. In 1992, the government of Alberta deeded 6060 over to the Rocky Mountain Rail Society with the proviso that she be maintained in operating condition to be enjoyed by the people of Alberta. The summer of 1993 marks the 25th anniversary of the Alberta Pioneer Railway Association and the Alberta Railway Museum. It seemed like an appropriate time to steam 6060 up once again and make the epic journey from Calgary to Edmonton for that occasion. This then documents that event and took place on July the 29th, 1993.
Fertilizer plant in southeast Calgary for the movement of locomotive 6060 from this facility to the Alberta Railway Museum in Edmonton. Locomotive 6060 has been at this location for the past 3 years and will leave Calgary this date, July the 28th, 1993, and will be transported over CP rail lines to the interchange at Canadian National, and then on by Canadian National train to Edmonton. crews of the Rocky Mountain Rail Society worked feverishly late into last night to get this locomotive going. There was difficulties with the oil, and as a result, at 1 o'clock this morning, they still didn't have a fire in the locomotive.
Okay. The drop's going up. See? That's oil going to that air compressor. See that? I'm hitting it way too fast, but just so you can see it. Some place where drops go up. That me? Whoa. That's, 230, 680. Okay, that's about set. It's set for about, I got to set a little heavy because, you know, I want to get her good knowledge for shutting on. Yeah.
Year-old Betty, as she's known, weighs 637 pounds and burns 6 gallons of bunker oil to the mile. But for all of her size and appetite, she's dear to the hearts of the 375 railway buffs who call themselves the Rocky Mountain Rail Society. Having first escaped the scrapyard at the last minute, the Betty then became the subject of an ownership dispute between the province and the people who had restored her. With no place to store the engine near her CNR home, the Society moved her to Calgary 4 years ago, and now she's going home.
We're going to Edmonton to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Alberta Pioneer Railway Museum for the long weekend. This is their 25th anniversary, and we thought it would be a memorable occasion.
Liability insurance for a running steam engine can cost thousands of dollars a day, so once it gets to the museum at the Mayo, the 6060 is liable to stay.
It's certainly going to stay there for the time being because you can see the difficulties in operating a 50-year-old steam engine in today's current situation. And none of the infrastructure is there anymore to support a steam engine. None of the water tanks, none of the fueling facilities and that sort of thing.
Fueling was a problem. The Bunker C fuel oil was contaminated with water, and the engine crew had no choice but to dump some of it and fire the boiler with old railway ties until the problem solved itself. By the way, the mess created is being vacuumed and cleaned by volunteers from hazmat services. Maintaining the fire in the boiler is, of course, critical.
It's the fire and the steam that operate the mechanical lubricators, which keeps the bearings on all the drive rods and the side rods going.
The engineer on this trip will be Harry Holm from Jasper, the president of the organization. And his fireman will be Ernie Ottewell from the Revelstoke Railway Museum in Revelstoke, British Columbia. Also traveling in the cab will be Norm Corness, who will be the machinist for the trip back to Edmonton.
The problem did finally clear itself. Officials from the CPR arrived to check the paperwork, and slowly, majestically, Betty took her leave for a new home at the Railway Museum.
Well, say goodbye to the bullet-nosed Betty. She's going home to Edmonton and the CN tracks where she belongs.
Been opened at the Kaminko Yard, and the CP locomotive and caboose are approaching the gate. 'Canadian Pacific Yard Unit number 1527 and caboose 43428 climb the hill, leading locomotive 6060. Locomotive 6060 starts into the climb, trailing its auxiliary tender. Following along is a CP Rail motor car. Inspecting the curve on this track up on the knoll. It is apparently the sharpest curve on this part of the line. Locomotive 6060 is backing slowly into the curve. Hopefully it will not go on the ground.
Survey crew streamlined this curve out at 15 degrees. This is the maximum lateral tolerance for a mountain class locomotive.
We're now lubricating the drivers so they will slip easier as it goes around the curve. After the wheels have been lubricated, locomotive 6060 is going to back up around this very tight curve.
This particular curve was a concern to the crews, as it is smaller than normal for this size of locomotive. We have lubricated the wheels several times, and as the wheels are lubricated, they move on a bit further. The locomotive 6060 has just about navigated this very sharp curve, and once it has cleared this curve, it should be really open till one or two more curves, which are also tight, but not as tight as this one. They've had to grease the wheels a number of times, or grease the drivers, and it is proceeding slowly under its own power.
Train has crossed the Blackfoot Trail.
Highway traffic appears oblivious to the sight of a great steam locomotive plodding along beside Dartmouth Road en route to CP's Olyth Yard.
1927 is pulling locomotive 6060. They will be crossing the bridge and then go into the interchange with Canadian National.
Has just been made, and the 6060 is now coming into the interchange with CN. .6060 and its accompanying tender will be hooked onto a pair of GMB1s and taken onto the high track towards Sarcee Yards. .6060 has been delivered to the CN interchange, and the CP unit is now heading back over onto its own track. .6060 has now arrived in Sarcee Yards and is backing up towards the shop.
.6060 will be marshaled behind the units of Grain Train 809 for the movement from Sarcee Yard, Calgary, to Calder Yard, Edmonton. Train 809, engine 5560, is approaching the highway underpass, mile 94.3, three-hill subdivision between Turricanna and Bicycle. Cross Creek. Train 809 is approaching the highway crossing at grade between Twining and Freehall, mile 62.5. Overpass at Equity, mile 53.8. The 5560 on the point of 809 approaches from the south. The town of Huxley. 6060 has arrived in Edmonton and is marshaled in reverse direction behind the units of train 567, leaving Calder Yard on the Vegreville subdivision.
The Alberta Railway Museum, located in northeast Edmonton, is 10 kilometers north of the Manning Freeway on 34th Street. Everything is being readied for the arrival of train 567 and engine 6060. The upper quadrant semaphore-type interlocking signal from the old Oban interlocker in Saskatchewan has been erected by the signal enthusiasts of the museum. The ball on the top of the water tank would indicate little water in the tub, but bridge and building members are restoring this 40,000-gallon water tank moved here from Gibbons, Alberta. The museum station is a standard 4th class Canadian Northern design and was erected on the original main line at mile 5 of the Sangudo sub in St. Albert in 1909. It was moved to the museum site in the 1970s. The train order disc over the operator's bay window is the predecessor of the more conventional train order board. Today, it is in the proceed position to allow 6060 to pass by the station when pulling up along the platform. Inside the station, the first trip operator on duty this morning is Jim Muncie of the Morse Telegraph Club. He is obtaining a report on number 567 out of Calder.
He left Calder about 7:35. He should be here in another 10 minutes.
Train 567 has arrived at mile 7. The units in 6060 are cut off and move north to the museum switch. The head-end brakeman removes the derail before reversing the museum switch. .6060 proceeds southward onto the museum trackage under its own tower. .567's brakeman normals the mainline switch on the Coronado sub. Garvey, a director with the Rocky Mountain Rail Society, has joined the crew in the cab for this final lap of the journey to the museum station.
Going to Vancouver and squandered our inheritance in the trespass there at Calgary. Now we return home here like the prodigal son with our hat in our hand and our pockets are empty, and we're requesting lodging and sustenance. Well, Ron, you've always got lodging and sustenance around here. You're home. And we are particularly proud and pleased that you chose the Alberta Railway Museum to be the place to bring this magnificent engine. It's the Alberta Historic Resort, it's the Canadian Historic Resort. As the largest operating steam engine in Canada, we're proud and pleased to have you here. And on behalf of the Alberta Railway Museum, I'd like to present you with this framed portrait of 6060 when she was in excursion service in Toronto and in the Eastern Canada, and I hope for many more years of profitable and exciting excursion service in Alberta under your wise and not unprofitable leadership. You and Harry deserve a great deal of credit. Thank you very, very much. Before we leave this interview, Herb, I think we should acknowledge for posterity our special appreciation to certain people. Yes. First and foremost would be Steve Eskin, the general manager of the chemical nitrate plant in Calgary, who provided us with 3 years free and secure storage. Secondly, there would be Peter Ladisher, special assistant to Ross Walker, Canadian National Senior Vice President, Western Mines. Peter had to walk the fine line between an unsympathetic management and doing something he thought was worthwhile. Next, it would be Al Hill, a hard-nosed old superintendent of Canadian Pacific's heavy haul division. It was his authorization that allowed us to escape the confines of Peninsula over CPR Carthage after CN was taken up the rails by History Letters. Lastly, there would be all our rail fans and friends in Calgary who helped us get this engine going and get it up here. And finally, we have to recognize our crew, Harry Holmes, our president, locomotive engineman from Jasper, Ernie Oswald, CPR engineer from Revelstoke, and last but not least, of course, Norm Cornett, our old resident nutspitter, who's now achieved the incredible title of Chief Mechanical Officer, Rocky Mountain Rail. Wonderful. Welcome again, Ron. All the best.
More fitting way to conclude this 6060 Odyssey than a photo opportunity combining 2 vintage steam locomotives. John Reckner on the 80-year-old 1392 will pull down to the Sonnet Junction switch and back into the shop lead. Joe Spear on the 6060 will pull down the main line and pose opposite. Surely a memorable moment in Alberta railway history.